Hello, in this video we're going over what the Amazon Vendor Services Program is and whether it's right for your business. So firstly, my name is Benjamin Bolshinsky. I used to work at Amazon for 2.5 years as a brand specialist in the AVS team, Amazon Vendor Services team. I've worked with some of the largest vendors in the program. And then after my stint at Amazon, I left to start a surf wax business, which failed. I started another 3 businesses over the next 1.5 years, all of which they made some money, but they failed. And then I started Vendor Launch, which is a done-for-you service-based consultancy for Amazon vendors. And that now makes me 4 times as much on a monthly basis as I had made when I worked at Amazon. So that's what I am, what I do. Now, what is AVS? So Amazon Vendor Services, also called Strategic Vendor Services in the past, depending also in what locale you're based, it might be called that. But essentially, it's a paid service that is offered by Amazon that aims to accelerate the growth of your Amazon vendor account and to help build kind of a closer relationship with Amazon. There are different levels of support service. Different levels come at a different cost. Depending on the size of your vendor account and depending on how much you're paying. You might be offered a different kind of level of service. Greater levels of service cost more, but they offer more support, maybe, more localized support as opposed to kind of offshore support, more frequent points of contact, but we'll be touching base with all of that shortly. So it's not a compulsory service, but generally speaking, the bigger, more strategic vendors that sell to Amazon are subscribed to AVS. So AVS will have a number of different areas of focus that influences and informs what they work on. Firstly, there's a focus on operations and supply chain processes, which looks at your products. Are they available to customers? Are they actually buyable? Looking at your lead times, the time it takes to get your products in stock. Looking up how the products are set up, whether you have direct fulfillment or vendor flex, all these different kind of programs that help look at the supply chain processes and operations. So that's the first thing that they look at. Ultimately, is the product available? Then the next pillar, the area of focus, is traffic. Is your product actually discoverable on the website? Does it come up in search? And so your AVS contact, your person who works in the AVS team and who is your primary contact, will be able to help with that. Looking at why the product is not discoverable. Are there any suppression issues? And can customers find your products? Selection, they look at selection, is your product added to Amazon? Can customers actually buy it? Obviously, if your product is not available, not added to Amazon, then that means customers can't buy it. No point advertising, no point doing all of this if the product isn't there to begin with. And then conversions. So this is what percentage of customers actually buy the product after they've looked at the page. And how do we maximize this conversion rate metric? And really, this is looking at like images, A+ content, how comprehensively detailed is the product page. So your AVS contact will look at that, and they will provide recommendations, and potentially they might even action certain areas to help increase that conversion rate. And then lastly, this is business advice. This is looking at the strategy of your account, looking at promotions, looking at programs, subscribe and save, direct fulfillment, more the long-term kind of levers that will influence, how your account performs. So essentially, those are the areas of focus that the AVS contact, your AVS contact will have. They will have metrics for each of these areas of focus, deliverables, goals, that will be based on these pillars. Moving on. So upon joining the program, and again, I should caveat this by saying this is highly dependent on what level of service you have with Amazon. If you're paying more, if you're a bigger vendor, you're paying more, you're going to have more detailed support, you're going to have more localized support as opposed to offshore support, for example. But broadly speaking, when you join the program, you will have an AVS contact that you'll be introduced to. With that contact and probably your vendor manager, you will develop kind of a business plan for the next year. Generally, you pay for the service, it's a yearly service. You will develop a business plan with KPIs based on the previous areas of focus that I mentioned. Each areas of focus will have metrics and KPIs associated with them. And so with your AVS contact and your vendor manager, you're going to agree on the priorities, goals, and targets for the next year. You will then set regular meeting cadences with your AVS contact. Again, this depends on the service level. If you're a full AVS vendor paying on the highest service level, you probably have weekly meetings that go for 30, 40 minutes with your AVS contact. If you're not at the full service level, you might have fortnightly or monthly meetings, but it depends on that service level you subscribe to. To make the most of AVS, my suggestion, having worked there for 2.5 years, is ultimately you want to set up mechanisms that keep everyone accountable. Whether that's those KPIs, whether that's deliverables, action items every week, you want to make sure that these are in writing, these are set out in plain English, everyone's aware of them, your vendor manager is CC'd on all of these, very important. Deadlines, and just make sure that everyone kind of has these deadlines and they adhere to them. If you do not have this, you'll find that none of your kind of goals get met, and so it's important to kind of have that. And then ultimately, like AVS, they should really help identify areas of focus for your business. Looking at different vendors, they should have an idea of what your pain points are, what your struggles are, and it should be a back and forth, an open dialogue between your AVS contact and your vendor manager to identify these areas of focus for your business. Now, AVS meetings, this is something that will take up kind of probably most of the time as part of the program. So you're going to have a number of different meetings with your AVS contact and or your vendor manager. So firstly, your one-on-one check-ins with your AVS contact. This dependent on the level of service you subscribe to, but this will probably occur either fortnightly in most cases, or if you're a full paying kind of vendor, then maybe weekly. So these are your check-ins with your AVS contact. So generally it's your AVS contact and your account manager in your business. This will go over your deliverables, your weekly goals, how you're tracking your sales, your operational metrics, what's your average lead time, what's your out of stock percentage, what's your conversion rates for your products, like all these different metrics, how are your promotions set up, any upcoming deals, merchandising opportunities, all of these kind of areas of focus you'll be going over with your brand specialist, with your AVS contact in your check-ins. And then you'll also have business reviews. So these generally are quarterly, and this is where your vendor manager will participate as well. So this is generally a bigger, kind of more strategic call, usually once per quarter. You might fly out to Amazon's office, or they might fly out to your office, and this is where you'll be going over quarterly results, how you're tracking in comparison to those goals that you set out, that you agreed to when you started the program. And so this is usually your vendor manager, the sales director of your business, your account manager, the brand specialist, all of you in a room or on a call, going over those KPIs and the metrics, and then looking at how the program is working. So those are your business reviews, and then you might have additional kind of supply chain meetings. If supply chain is a particular area of focus, maybe you've got a lot of like chargebacks or, issues with Amazon receiving the product. So these might be a focus in a particular week or in a particular month. And so you might have specific meetings with the relevant contacts to tackle those issues. So what can AVS help with? Like, why do you actually want the program? And so there's a number of things. Firstly, like ordering issues. If you find that Amazon are not ordering some products and you've had a look, but you just can't figure out why certain products aren't being ordered. You've looked at the cost price, there is a cost price, the products look set up correctly in Vendor Central, but for some reason Amazon isn't placing any orders. This is where your brand specialist, your AVS contact, can help with. They can deep dive in the back end whether the product is set up correctly, whether there's an offer within Amazon's system that they can actually buy the product from. And so that's where they can really be of great help. So you can also resolve most of these issues yourself in Vendor Central if you know what you're doing. But the AVS contact can greatly expedite that and really be of great help. Supply chain deep dives, again, if you have issues with Amazon receiving products, chargebacks, they can potentially kind of look into that, set up the relevant meetings with the relevant stakeholders, and really get to the bottom of these supply chain deep dives. Potentially, you can even attend Amazon's fulfillment center with them if you're a bigger vendor. Also, product setups, they can help with setting up your products, SEO, all these kind of things. Generally speaking, they're not as kind of good at that as you are in your business, just because they don't work for your business. They don't know your product as well as you do. So in my experience, this is best left to the vendor themselves. And then another key area is product suppressions. If products are not buyable, then they can greatly help with that in identifying the reasons, looking at the internal tools in terms of why the product is suppressed, what the issue is, and they can greatly help with that. And then lastly, setting up promotions and deals. At the moment, you might find that there's a promotion coming up. You send some offshore contact your funding and the products you want to run, and then it's radio silence. You don't hear back for months whether a product has been included in the deal, and if it's been included in the deal, at what price point Amazon's going to run it. You have no idea how the promotions are set up, whether products have been accepted, or what really is going on. Very common. This is where AVS can help. They obviously can help with actually setting up the promotions, and you want to have kind of that back and forth dialogue between which products are okay to run as a deal, which Amazon are not going to run as a deal, and just having this more kind of strategic conversation in terms of the promotions and deals that you're going to run. So that's a major benefit of AVS. But then more importantly, what can't AVS help with? So the first one is cost price margin. So this remains the responsibility for your vendor manager. If you're trying to put through a cost price increase, if you're trying to negotiate margin, your AVS contact, that's not their responsibility. It is your vendor manager's responsibility. And so you're still going to be going through that with your vendor manager. And so generally speaking, they keep cost price discussions, margin discussions are generally quite separate between your vendor manager and your AVS contact. Advertising. So advertising, you're still going to be running advertising. Advertising is not under the scope of retail or under the scope of the vendor management team. And so they're not going to help. Your brand specialist will not help with running your ad campaigns, monitoring that. Again, you'll probably have someone internally, or you're going to have someone, an agency or a contact that helps with that. So that's again, that'll be quite separate from your AVS contact. You should keep them informed. You should keep them informed in terms of which products you'll advertise, your strategies for sure, but they're not going to be executing that on your behalf. They're not going to create and design images, videos, A+ content. They won't do that. That remains kind of your responsibility. And then some other factors to consider: AVS churn. So in my experience, the AVS contact changes at a maximum 1.5 to 2 years. The reason is, even if your AVS contact does an incredible job, you can expect that they'll get promoted at some point. And in my experience, 1.5 to 2 years, at that point, the AVS contact will probably get promoted and move on to more strategic, different area of the business, or maybe they'll move to the vendor manager. So obviously they're not going to be around forever. If they're also underperforming, you might have a different AVS contact come in as well. It might be in a couple months. So again, like most businesses, there's churn, whether that's kind of good churn, they get promoted, or whether whether someone else comes into the role. So you can expect that you'll have a new AVS contact every after a certain period. That can be good if it's if the contact kind of improves, or it can be bad because you have to start that relationship again to some extent. So that's just something to keep in mind. But again, in my experience, when you work at Amazon, at that role as a brand specialist, you can probably expect 2 years or so. That's when you start having conversations with your boss in terms of like, okay, well, I've been in this role for 2 years. I'm pretty familiar with the work. Where else can I go at Amazon? Can I get promoted? So that's just a side note. And then the other thing is AVS contacts. Probably your AVS contact works with multiple vendors, so it's not they're not your only contact. So your AVS contact will have probably 4 or 5 vendors that they're looking after, and so their attention will be split across those contacts. Depending on that service level, they will have fewer contacts. If you're a full vendor, if you're not a full vendor, if you're a kind of lower tier in terms of the service level, they might have more contacts. So that's just something to keep in mind. They're not your sole, you are not their sole contact. And so, is AVS right for you? I've included a link in the description of this YouTube video. You can book a free call with me where I'll go through step by step, is AVS specifically right for your vendor account? Knowing what I know and knowing the 2 years that I worked at Amazon, I can provide a more detailed answer to that question for you. So yeah, feel free to book a call in the comment section, and I look forward to speaking with you. Have a great day. Bye.